everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Emily and I hope y'all are doing great. Today we are going to continue with our Pride Month video series talking about various LGBTQIA+ identities and orientations. So in our video yesterday, or in the last video, we talked about what sexual orientation was, and we also discussed the gay identity, what it means to be gay. And in that video we talked about how gay was a label that, or a sexual orientation that could apply to both males and females. It applies to anyone it can apply to anyone who experiences sexual attraction to people of the same sex as their own, right? But we mentioned in that video, or I mentioned in that video, that some women may prefer the term lesbian to describe their same-sex attraction. So we're going to be talking about that today. So a lesbian is a woman who is sexually attracted to other women. So it's relatively straightforward there. Some lesbian women may prefer the term gay over the term lesbian. Some may use the terms interchangeably. You know, everyone is a little bit different in what they prefer, and whatever word you choose to use is totally fine. I feel like it's important again to note today that you don't have to have had a sexual experience to know what your sexual orientation is. So, you know, just as we don't expect heterosexual people to have had a sexual experience to know that they're straight, we shouldn't expect, you know, LGBT+ people to have had sexual experiences to know that they're LGBT+. You know, you don't have to have had a sexual experience with anyone at all to know what your sexual orientation is. That's not to say that, you know, healthy, consensual, safe, you know, sexual experiences and sexual orientation with people of, you know, various genders can't be helpful in figuring out or defining what your sexual orientation is. It definitely can be helpful for some people, but it's not necessary. You don't have to have had sex ever in your life to know what your sexual orientation is. And I just felt like this is a good time to sort of bring that up again and just remind everybody. So sort of to go back and recap, lesbian is an identity or a sexual orientation that describes women who are sexually attracted to other women. So some lesbians may choose to add an additional label to themselves to sort of more accurately describe who they are, to describe their identity. And we're going to talk a little bit about those today. They are not necessary identifiers. They are not identifiers that every person in the lesbian community uses, but I did want to talk about them just in case you had heard them before, or you were seeing them online and you were like, what do those things mean? Or so maybe you can be like, hey, that sounds like me. You know, I just did want to bring them up just to sort of, you know, talk about them. But these are the terms butch and femme. So some people may choose the term butch to describe themselves, or some lesbians may choose the term butch to describe themselves, or femme to describe themselves. And butch describes a lesbian woman who is traditionally more masculine in, you know, appearance and style, in the way they dress, and you know, maybe the way they act. While femme describes a lesbian woman who is traditionally more feminine in the way, you know, she appears, dresses, acts, behaves. But in saying that, I don't want to sort of present it as something that, or as a label that you have to choose. You have to be, you know, one or the other. You don't. You can just be lesbian. That's totally fine. But I did want to put those out there because some people do choose to add these additional layers of description to most accurately describe themselves. But some people really, you know, some people take issue with these labels because they worry that it sort of presents that there is this dichotomy within the lesbian community of, you know, sort of masculine and feminine. It's sort of, that maybe could be construed as mirroring sort of the dynamic in heterosexual relationships, and that's not the case at all. These terms have been somewhat controversial, but it's important to remember that these terms are just to add an additional label to most accurately describe someone. They do not signal a desire to replicate heterosexual relationships, right? You know, butches can be in a relationship with other butch lesbians, femmes can be in a relationship with other femmes, and even within butch-femme partnerships, these partners describe their relationship as, you know, kind of yin and yang, as more about complementing each other, as balancing each other, versus the sort of traditional, typical, patriarchal, heterosexist dynamic in which the man is dominating over the woman who is submissive. You know, a lot of femme lesbians see themselves as very strong, independent, self-sufficient, even though they choose to present as more feminine. The designations femme and butch simply serve to add another layer of identity and description, not to signal an adherence to traditional patriarchal and heterosexist standards of relationships. And I feel like that brings us to a good point that in same-sex relationships, no person is the man and no person is the woman. Each person is who they are. There's no gender divide in same-sex relationships. These relationships are often much more egalitarian than heterosexual relationships. There's a lot more equality between the partners. And, you know, same-sex individuals are perfectly capable of having healthy, happy, committed, wonderful relationships with each other. There's nothing inherently wrong or disordered or bad about same-sex relationships. I think that it's, you know, really important to talk about this because there's a lot of myths and stereotypes about, you know, same-sex relationships, that they are, you know, less stable or less committed than heterosexual relationships, when in fact that's not the case at all. Gay and lesbian individuals desire committed partnerships at sort of the same rate or at the same levels that heterosexual people do. And in fact, gay and lesbian couples report levels of relationship satisfaction and commitment that are both comparable to and sometimes even higher than heterosexual relationships. Or people in heterosexual relationships report their levels of commitment as and happiness as. And same-sex relationships are just as stable as heterosexual relationships. Sort of on the same token, children raised by same-sex parents are happy, healthy kids. They have normal social relationships. They are no more likely to be sexually abused than their peers raised by heterosexual couples. They don't have increased issues with personality development, behavior, or sexual development. And overall, they develop normally into happy, healthy kids. Any of these fears that many people have about children raised by same-sex couples or about people in same-sex relationships are completely unfounded and are not supported by any scientific evidence or fact. In fact, research shows that the opposite of all of these fears and myths and stereotypes is true. These attitudes and fears are just, honestly, they're just simple homophobia. There's nothing real or valid about them. They're myths. And that's not to say that same-sex relationships, that, you know, people in same-sex relationships can't experience unhappiness or instability or fighting or ups and downs or intimate partner violence or abuse. Of course those things are present in same-sex relationships, just as they're present in heterosexual relationships, but they're not present in same-sex relationships because the people are same-sex. Just as when those things happen in heterosexual relationships, it's not because the people are heterosexual. Yes, of course, same-sex partners can experience those things just as heterosexual partners can. It's not because they're same-sex. So, you know, you can rest easy knowing that these negative stereotypes are myths, that they're not true. And if you hear someone talking about them, you can say, hey, that's not true. That's wrong. You know, psychological and sociological research doesn't support those facts that you're spewing. You know, you can dispute those things now, and you can rest easy knowing they're not true. You don't have to worry about adopting a child if you're in a same-sex partnership. You don't have to worry about being in a same-sex partnership. You can be just as happy and healthy as the next person. And with that, I think we will go ahead and conclude today's video talking about the lesbian identity, the L and LGBTQ+, as well as, I guess, the healthiness of same-sex relationships, the propensity for healthiness in same-sex relationships. I hope that this video answered some questions for you, that it laid some stereotypes to rest, and that you learned something. In tomorrow's video, we'll be talking about bisexuality and what it means to be bisexual. In the description box down below, I will leave links to resources for finding LGBT plus affirmative therapist, some coming out guides. I'll leave numbers for various crisis and suicide hotlines, as well as additional resources, so definitely check the description box down below. I also link all of my sources down there so that if you want to do additional research on your own, you can. And with that being said, please remember that if you are considering suicide, please do call a suicide hotline or call 911. You are worth it, and suicide is never the answer. And with all that being said, I hope you guys have a great day. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye-bye.